Statement, the Secretary of State for Transport. Secretary Patrick McLoughlin.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to make a statement about Network Rail following today's publication of their annual report. In September 2014, Network Rail was reclassified as a public body as a result of an accounting decision by the Office of National Statistics. Since then, the government has had greater direct oversight of the company. I want to report to the House on Network Rail's performance and the actions that I am taking to hold it to account. Some things are working well. Our railways are carrying more passengers than ever before. Journeys have more than doubled since privatisation. They went up by an average of 4.2% last year alone. Safety has improved. The reliability of assets on the railways is up. Network Rail reopened the line at Dawlish after the horrendous storms in the time expected. It has opened a new station at Reading ahead of schedule and under budget. A modernised Birmingham New Street complex will be fully open later this year. But I do not pretend that everything is perfect, because it isn't. Where performance has fallen below the standards I expect, I want that sorted out. When we saw King's Cross at Christmas and at London Bridge earlier this year, what we saw at King's Cross at Christmas and London Bridge earlier this year was unacceptable, and I said so at the time. Since then, Network Rail has demonstrated that they have learnt those lessons, and I pay tribute to the significant programmes of work they delivered over Easter and the May Day bank holidays. But to the improved performance, we need to invest and we need good management. The truth is that much of this work should have been done decades ago. Successive governments failed to invest the sums necessary on our railway network, and that is why we find ourselves in the situation we are in today. And so when we are faced with the choice between building infrastructure our country needs or our railways becoming a brake on growth and opportunity, this government chooses to invest for the future in things such as Crossrail in London and HS2 for the country. And that is why in 2012 the government set out the most ambitious rail investment programme since the Victorians, a £38 billion programme on enhancing, operating and maintaining the current network. It means hard work, good design, thousands of people working night after night, sometimes in very, very difficult conditions. On the 216 miles of the Great Western Line alone, Network Rail needs to alter around 170 bridges, lower parts of the trackbed and install 14,000 masts of overhead line equipment, electrifying parts of the railway constructed by Brunel in the 1830s, so that the new British-built fast trains can speed up services, provide more seats and services. I know that members and their constituents want to see these improvements, and I am determined that they will happen. But in parts of this programme, Network Rail's performance has not been good enough. Already, the Chief Executive and the Board are responding. Since joining Network Rail in 2014, the Chief Executive, Mark Kahn, has reviewed the organisation's structure, performance and accountability. He has strengthened his team, he has a structure for improvement, and I want to see him drive that forward. But there are still challenges. Important aspects of Network Rail's investment programme are costing more and taking longer. Electrification is difficult. The UK supply chain for complex signalling work needs to be stronger. Construction rates have been slow. It has taken longer to obtain planning consents from some local authorities than expected. But, Mr. Speaker, that is no excuse. All of these problems could and should have been foreseen by Network Rail. So I want to inform the House of the action that I am taking to reset this programme and get it back on track. First, none of Network Rail's executive directors will receive a bonus for the past year. The current chairman, Mr. Richard Parry-Jones, is stepping down. His replacement will be the current Transport Commissioner in London, Sir Peter Hendy, someone of huge experience who helped keep London moving during the Olympics. I am asking him to develop proposals by the autumn for how the rail upgrade programme will be carried out. Second, I am appointing Richard Brown as a Special Director of Network Rail with immediate effect. He will update me and report directly to me on progress. Third, I intend to simplify Network Rail's governance by ending the role of the public members. I'd like to thank them for their commitment, but the reclassification of Network Rail has changed the organisation's accountability. Fourth, it is important we understand what can be done better in the future for future programmes. I have therefore asked Dame Colette Bow, an experienced economist and regulator, to look at the lessons learned and to make recommendations for better investment planning in the future. I will, Mr Speaker, publish her report in the autumn. I know that members on all sides of the House value the improvements that are planned to the railways in their areas. Network Rail spending should stay within its funding allowance. Electrification of the Great Western Line is a top priority, and I want Network Rail to concentrate its efforts on getting that right. On the Midland Main Line, better services can be delivered on that line before electrification, with such things as speed improvement works, so that works on the electrification will be paused. I want it to be done, and I want it to be done well. It will be part of our future plans for the route. Meanwhile, the next franchise for the Trans-Pennine route between Leeds and Manchester will bring modern trains and additional capacity. Current work on electrification will be paused, because we need a much more ambition for that route, building the powerhouse for the north with a fast, high-capacity Trans-Pennine electric route. We are working with businesses and the cities in the north to make that happen. Just as in the north, we have already seen electric trains introduced this year between Liverpool and Manchester and between Liverpool and Wigan. Soon we will see them spread further to Bolton, to Blackpool, and that work is underway. Meanwhile, in the south east, Crossrail and Thameslink are well underway. In Anglia, we will bring about modern, faster trains to Ipswich and Norwich in the next franchise. For passengers in the south west, the new contract with First Great Western will provide significant extra capacity. I hope soon to be able to announce further news on the new trains for that region. We will also keep commuter rail fares capped in real terms for the whole of this Parliament. People earnings will rise more quickly than rail fares. Mr Speaker, the first time that has happened since 2002. Mr Speaker, passengers want a railway that is better, faster and more reliable than today, powered by the huge increase in investment and the ambition right across this country. That is what they will get. I commend this statement to the House.
Michael Dugher.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I begin by thanking the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. But, Mr Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Today is the day when the government's total failure to deliver a fit-for-purpose railway has been completely and so damningly exposed. First, we had the publication of the latest National Rail Passenger Survey, which I noticed the Secretary of State didn't mention, which shows that passenger satisfaction has dropped once again. And now we have the Secretary of State announcing that vital investment projects, like the electrification of the Midland Main Line, that he promised to deliver, are being shelved due to his repeated failure to get a grip on Network Rail. The electrification of Trans-Pennine Express Railway line between Manchester, Leeds and York has also been shelved. So much for the Northern Powerhouse. And we remain concerned about the future of the electrification of the Great Western Line. The Secretary of State spent the election campaign repeating promises that he knew he would break after the election, and that's what has been revealed today. The truth is, Mr Speaker, passengers have had to endure a catalogue of failure on our railways by ministers since 2010. We had the Christmas rail chaos that the Secretary of State referred to, although he neglected to mention that ministers have been warned about that and failed to act. We've had the inflation-busting fare rises of over 20% on average, whilst delusional ministers talk about fair fares and comfortable commuting, a world away from the experience of people at places like London Bridge. We had the collapse of the West Coast franchise competition, cost the taxpayer £50 million. The misery for commuters at London Bridge. Ministers may try to shift all the blame to Network Rail, but this happened on the government's watch, and the responsibility for this mess lies squarely with the government. Now, Mr Speaker, let me turn to a number of specific questions. Will the Secretary of State confirm that when the Government placed the development of key Network Rail projects on hold for up to 2 years after the 2010 election, important preparation work was not undertaken? Will he confirm that this meant, as the rail regulator has said, that the Government committed to the projects in 2012 based on, and I quote, limited development work? We know that Network Rail started to put together a list of projects that would be axed back in November. Why has it taken so long for the Government to reveal some of those to the House and be honest with the travelling public? And crucially, can the Secretary of State confirm that he received a report on the 1st of September last year on the state of these programmes from Network Rail, his department and the regulator, and he refused to publish them? Why did he sit on the report and pretend to the public that everything was fine until after the election? Now, Mr Speaker, Labour first raised issues of delays to the Great Western project in the House over a year ago. But again, why has it taken so long for the Government to admit that there are fundamental problems with that project? Why did the Secretary of State not listen, for instance, to the Transport Select Committee 6 months ago when it warned that key rail enhancement projects have, and I quote, been announced by ministers without Network Rail having a clear estimate of what the projects will cost, leading to uncertainty about whether the projects will be delivered on time or at all? And why did it not raise the alarm when the estimated cost of electrifying Midland Main Line rose from £250 million to £540 million and then to £1.3 billion? Or the cost of the estimates for Great Western electrification rose from £548 million to £930 million to £1.7 billion? Mr Speaker, just 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of State refused to answer my questions in the House about the need to tackle failures at Network Rail and whether or not he was planning changes to Network Rail. Will the Secretary of State explain why he's dithered for so long when he's had the power to exert more ministerial responsibility over Network Rail, including by appointing the Special Director since September last year? On this side, we have been warning time and time again there needs to be fundamental changes in how our railways are run, that ministers need to get a grip, that passengers should have a proper voice, and more public control is needed. Mr Speaker, we welcome the appointment of Sir Peter Hendy as Chairman of Network Rail. We'll look carefully at some of the other announcements that the Government has been made. But to finish, the news today does expose a catalogue of failure by ministers, and it lands a fatal blow to the Government's claims that it is delivering a better railway for passengers. Isn't it clear that the Government's real legacy is one of rail fare hikes, plummeting passenger satisfaction, ongoing disruptions and delays, major projects years behind, promises of vital investment betrayed, a railway that is not fit for purpose, and all the while out-of-touch ministers sat in Whitehall overseeing what is a complete and utter shambles?
Well, Mr Speaker, I've got to say, it is true that I have been the Transport Secretary for 2.5 years now, and with all the catalogue of terror that the honourable gentleman has outlined, I've got to say in those 2.5 years, in those over 2.5 years, there have been 2 occasions on which the opposition have chosen to debate transport on opposition days. 2 occasions. One was a day after I was appointed, and one was on the day that his predecessor was sacked as the Shadow Transport Secretary. So as far as warning us and wanting this lifting up the political agenda, we've heard nothing. And we've heard nothing, Mr Speaker, because they are truly embarrassed by their record. They are embarrassed about the way in which we have invested, in the way in which we have lifted the railways, in the way in which we have given encouragement to the railways, to the railway industry. It is simply a fact, Mr Speaker, I have not today made any cuts whatsoever to the rail investment strategy, the largest rail investment strategy that has been taken place. The amount of money is exactly the same as what it was last week, and that is the budget which they have got to be delivered in. And I will also say, Mr Speaker, the simple fact is this: I will not take any lessons from a government, from a Labour Party, which in 13 years electrified 10 miles of lines in this country. We've electrified more this year than they did in all of that time. Or, Mr. Speaker, the £895 million project to rebuild railways around Reading and to remove major bottlenecks. The transformation of £750 million to upgrade Birmingham New Street Station. The refurbishment of Nottingham Station. All the investment that is going into Nottingham Station. More investment in Nottingham in the last 5 years than was seen in the previous 13 years of the last Labour government. The new station that was built at Wakefield, the Ipswich Chord that has been completed, the Doncaster Chord that's been created, phase 1 of the Thameslink project of £6.5 billion, the completion of Crossrail tunnelling. Mr. Speaker, I could go on a lot more. I'll take no lectures. I'm determined to get on top of it. I'm determined to see the delivery of those programmes which are so important for all our constituents.
Simon Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will my right honourable friend accept that my constituents are fed up to the back teeth, which through the failings of Network Rail have seen points and signalling failures too often disrupting the service and the electrification and upgrade of the track, and they will warmly welcome the initiative by my right honourable friend to seek improvements to pin Network Rail down to deliver and to maintain the £38.5 billion investment. But can he confirm from his statement that the new franchise for Anglia, which includes and will be warmly welcomed in Chelmsford, the new rolling stock in that franchise, will cover both intercity trains, but more importantly, the vast majority of trains my constituents use, which are the commuter trains down into Liverpool Street?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first congratulate my honourable friend on his inclusion in the recent honours list. Well deserved. Can I also say to my right honourable friend, the fact is that I'm looking forward to receiving the franchise, the invitations to tender and the results of that franchise competition for the Great Anglia Line. I think we do need to see improvements on that line, both to the Norwich to 90 and Ipswich to 60. And as he well knows, the inclusion of new rolling stock will score very highly on those particular franchises which are at the moment being tendered.
Mike Weir.
Speaker, I note the changes in the structure of Network Rail announced by the Minister today. Given that Network Rail still plays a part in Scotland's rail network, can he say if he has consultations with Scottish ministers before implementing these changes in structure? And I note that most of the changes in railways are referring only to England, and I have no real comment on these. But when HS2 was announced, one of the reasons it said it wouldn't be increased, taken to Scotland was because there would be increased journey times through the rest of the network. Can he give us an assurance that none of these changes are going to jeopardise these increased journey times to Scotland?
I'm grateful to the honourable member. I can say that I did speak to Keith Brown last night to outline what I was anticipating saying this morning, and I will also be meeting him on Monday of next week, where we'll discuss a number of these particular issues. As far as HS2, it's certainly that as soon as HS2 starts to operate, I believe Scotland will get the benefits of them, because anybody who travels at the moment on the Javelin train from St Pancras down to areas in Kent which aren't served completely by the high-speed line, they get the advantage of using that high-speed line. So I hope that answers the honourable member's question.
Sir Alan Haselhurst.
Is my right honourable friend aware that perceptive travellers in on the West Anglia and Great Eastern lines will recognise that by his statement he has actually listened to and responded to all the various pieces of advice that he has had from all different quarters, and that therefore this statement is to be particularly welcome. And it will be enhanced if those more reliable journeys, which we hope these changes will bring about, will be in new trains as well.
Well, I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. He has never lost an opportunity to impress upon me the importance of train services as far as his constituency is concerned, and indeed pressing for extra investment in the railways. And I come back to the point, Mr. Speaker, as I said at the beginning of my statement. This is about a government which is fully committed to huge investment on our railway network. When we announced the £38 billion, that was seen as beyond expectations of many people in the railway industry, and I want to make sure that it is delivered efficiently and effectively for that bit which is paid for by the fare-paying passengers, but also for that is obviously given directly by the taxpayer.
Mrs. Louise Ellman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Network Rail certainly has a lot of good achievements, but last January the Transport Select Committee warned that escalating costs and poor planning jeopardised the investment programme and indeed questioned whether that programme was ever realistic. Could the Secretary of State explain to the House precisely what his statement made today means in relation to electrification being paused in the north, and what does it mean for his statement in relation to the Midland Main Line service?
Well, can I congratulate the Honourable Lady on being elected, unopposed as it was, as the new chairman of the Transport Select Committee first. The pause is exactly what I've said. It is a pausing of that particular scheme until I get the report from Sir Peter Hendy. I've made it very clear it was always going to, the Midland electrification was always going to follow the Great Western. Great Western was always going to be the priority, and when one sees some of the challenges that have to be faced as far as the Great Western is concerned, people will certainly understand that.
Jeremy Quinn.
Thank you, Speaker. My constituents will warmly welcome my right honourable friend's commitment on commuter rail fares. Will he also reassure them that him getting to grips with Network Rail will help resolve all the outstanding issues in Southern Region?
Yes, and my honourable friend, the Minister responsible for railways, has been particularly good at keeping all local members in touch, particularly with some of the problems that they have been facing. There is no doubt, though, I say to my honourable friend, in all fairness, that when you're doing the major refurbishment we're going to do, there will be occasions when passengers are put to discomfort and passengers are inconvenienced. I'm afraid that is part of the legacy of having to catch up with so much underinvestment, which was happening over very many years. So I do understand that. I have to also say, well, the honourable member says London Bridge. Yes, I'm the first to accept that some of the conditions that have been faced at London Bridge have been unacceptable. I've got to say some of the conditions faced by me when I used St Pancras Station were unacceptable. But we have now got a fantastic station, a station which is almost a destination in its own right.
John MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I refer to my register of interests as the chair of the RT Parliamentary Group. I take it from this statement that the Secretary of State has resisted some of the calls from the wider elements in his party with regard to breaking up and privatising Network Rail. But could I take him to his fourth point, where it says it's important that we understand what can be done better in future investment programmes? Could I suggest to him one of the key elements is to start listening to some of the workers working at the front line, and that in Dame Collett Bow's review that there is a mechanism built in for consultation with the trade unions on an ongoing basis about how we improve the programmes?
I'm certainly willing to look at that, and I think some of those workers that he refers to that work on the front line do an incredibly difficult job, sometimes in most horrendous conditions, often in the middle of the night when conditions are not very good. And I think that was part of the lessons that we need to draw on as to what happened at King's Cross over Christmas.
Sir Edward Garnier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's very kind of you. My right honourable friend and I are regular users of the East Midland Main Line from St Pancras through Market Harbour to Leicester and, in his case, beyond. Our experience, I suggest, is pretty well satisfactory. The one concern that I have had expressed to me this morning by local government leaders in the East Midlands, and in particular Leicestershire, is that the pausing, so-called, of the electrification may have some effect on development within the East Midlands. Could my right honourable friend assure me that the pausing will have absolutely no effect whatsoever upon the commercial and economic development of the East Midlands?
Well, what I say is my honourable friend rightly points out, both he and I do make regular use of that particular line. What I will say is that priority for the route is to improve capacity and speeds so that we can have 6 trains an hour from St Pancras and not as at present the present 5. We will press on with the rebuild to speed and straighten the track at Market Harbour and the Derby rebuilding as far as track layout is concerned. This will mean quicker services soon and mean that we can make the most of electrification and new trains when they follow in future franchises.
Graham Stringer.
8 months ago, Mr Speaker, at the Transport Select Committee, I asked the Secretary of State whether or not he was satisfied with the governance arrangements for Network Rail, where they in actual fact were marking their own homework. He expressed himself completely satisfied with that arrangement, and he comes here and changes it today. Does he not regret that decision? And rather than in his statement where he blames Network Rail for not having foreseen these problems, if he'd taken action then, would he not have been able to foresee these problems and do something about it?
Good question.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said, the reclassification took place in September when when I appeared before the Transport Select Committee, I was asked to give my opinions as things were then. I have since had chance, with the greater accessibility we've had and the more direct control we've had, to think a bit more about the right way forward. That's why I've come forward with today's statement and actually outlined what I've announced this morning.
Mims Davis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I urge my right honourable friend to work with the new management of Network Rail in terms of with the Solent LEP and local stakeholders in my constituency of Eastleigh, and in certainly Network Rail bringing forward a positivity in terms of bringing forward the Chicken or Link Road. So the new management working with outside bodies really positively.
I'm more than happy to look into the points that my honourable friend has asked me to look into and to respond to her in due course. Mr Speaker, I was a junior minister in the Department of Transport some 25 years ago, and the truth is in those days railways were not talked about. The truth is today that they are very important to connections for all our constituents, and they have also got the kind of investment as a result of what this government has done and the last government correct.
Mr Clive Betts.
There will be a great deal of anger today in Sheffield about the decision on the Midland Main Line, particularly amongst business, and some cynicism as well that the electrification was on track before May the 7th and has been abandoned so soon after May the 7th. Will the Secretary confirm, contrary to what he just said, that there have been very clear ministerial commitments, both in this House and in writing, that electrification would be completed by 2020. That's absolutely clear. So what he's done today is to renege on those commitments, and he's really absolutely no idea at all when and if electrification will actually take place.
Mr Speaker, to say I've reneged on those commitments is wrong. What I've said is I obviously, and there's always been the case, the Great Western Railway line was always the priority to get electrified, and I want to see the electrification in the other areas too. And quite a bit of the work that is required as far as bridge building and bridge replacement on the Midland Main Line has already taken place. So I very much hope that we will see electrification on that line, but it is right at the moment to make sure we get the best value for money as far as the railways are concerned.
Mr Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I say to my right honourable friend, he's right when he says electrification is difficult. And I know that he has spent a lot of time the last year making sure that Network Rail bear down on those costs, and so I warmly welcome his statement today, particularly some of the measures about governance. But can I urge him to take all the measures necessary to make sure that Network Rail do keep within their spending and funding allowance, because I think then, and only then, passengers will really see the benefit from this government's long-term commitment to rail investment.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, and I agree with the points he makes entirely. The levels of investment that we're putting into the railways is unprecedented as far as recent governments are concerned, but it is also right that we get best value for money out of that investment. And that is one of the charges that I've asked Sir Peter Hendy in his report to come back to me, and I look forward to receiving that report later this year.
Jonathan Edwards.
Speaker, I'm glad he has confirmed that the electrification of the Great Western Line is a priority, but can he confirm that the pre-election promise made to the people of the west of my country that the line would be electrified to Swansea by 2018 will be honoured?
Well, Mr Speaker, what I can say for the people of Swansea and for his constituents is they do get the benefits straight away in 2018. I'll clarify exactly with him in a letter, but of the new IEP trains which we'll be able to run. And yes, electrification to Swansea all the way is part of the programme which I've said is a top priority.
Mr Edward Arger.
Thank you, sir. My constituents in Chelmsford will welcome, as I do, my right honourable friend's clear commitment and determination to improving our railways and his strong track record in tackling the issues left unaddressed for so long by the party opposite. They will, however, sir, be a little disappointed by the pause in the Midlands mainline electrification. Without my labouring the point too far, can he reassure me it is just that, a pause, not a cancellation, that he remains committed to it, and will he or the Rail Minister agree to meet me to discuss the rail services serving my constituents in Leicestershire?
I certainly agree with my honourable friend or myself will obviously meet my honourable friend to discuss this in more detail. But as I said earlier on, priority for the Midland Main Line is that we can have 6 trains an hour from St Pancras. That still remains the case. We can do that by rebuilding and straightening the track at Market Harborough and by actually remodelling the Derby station as far as track work is concerned. And yes, I still want to see electrification of the Midland Main Line.
Tom Brake.
Secretary of State was very generous in describing Network Rail's performance at London Bridge as being unacceptable. I think it was an absolute shambles and a disgrace, and passengers suffered the consequences for months afterwards. I'm pleased that he has cancelled any bonuses, and I hope that if in the next financial year their performance is just as diabolical, they won't get any in that year either. But can I ask him to look at the issue of compensation for passengers? Could he look at whether passengers should be compensated if trains are delayed by just 15 minutes? And could I also ask him to encourage the train companies and Network Rail to ensure that they publicise on every single delayed train and at every station which delayed trains are arriving at how passengers can claim for compensation?
Well, look, I certainly accept what passengers had to put up with earlier this year at London Bridge was unacceptable. I don't think that anybody would argue with that for 1 second. And I will certainly look at his suggestions as to the way in which passenger services can be improved. I would just make the point to him, though, you cannot do the kind of refurbishment that is taking place at London Bridge, where they will see a hugely better, more capacity built station than we've witnessed, and will be a great enhancement as far as passenger services are concerned once it is finished. But I do accept that some of the delays and some of the way in which the information was given out was absolutely unacceptable. And I think both Network Rail and we have learnt lessons from that incident.
Mr Philip Hollowbone.
The pause in the electrification project for Midland Main Line is not good news for my Kettering constituents, especially when the rate of return on this project is greater than that for the Great Western electrification, where all the delays and problems have occurred. Can the Secretary of State tell the House what effect this will have, if any, on the timing of the franchise renewal for the Midland Main Line? And given that he's just told the House that better services can be achieved before electrification, will he do his best to reinstate the half-hourly service north from Kettering, which was halved under the last Labour government, either before the franchise renewal or in the franchise renewal?
Well, I will certainly look at what my humble friend has asked for and to see if it is possible. The franchising that I've set out for East Midlands will be on target as far as the extended franchise that we'll look at for East Midlands trains, but then when we go out for refranchising will be an opportunity to look in greater detail at some of the improvements which my honourable friend has just called for.
Paul Blomfield.
Speaker, the Secretary of State will know that his deliberate decision to choose to deprioritise electrification for the Midland Main Line will mean talk of the Northern Powerhouse will be seen as empty words in Sheffield. But he did also say that the line improvements will continue. Will he confirm that that will be all the line improvements, including Market Harborough, and will he say when the work will be completed by?
I've just have confirmed to many of my honourable friends that Market Harborough work will go on. I just do find it a little hard to take from the benches opposite that we've done nothing for the Northern Powerhouse. Labour did nothing in 2004 when it let the last franchise for Northern Rail on a zero growth plan. That was their ambition in 2004 for the North, zero. We have a great ambition for the North, and we will see improvement as we are seeing the rollout of those electric services which I've just explained and referred to in my statement. Anybody who goes now today to the Victoria station will see a station that has been rebuilt as a result of the investment put in by this government.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Mr. Speaker, we have at the dispatch box one of the very best ministers in the government, but my constituents will be very disappointed about the news about Midland Main Line. But that could be corrected, of course, by the improvement the Secretary of State has talked about. The real problem with the line is capacity and numbers of trains. If we can get that sorted, I think my constituents would be quite happy.
Well, I'm grateful to my humble friend. I do get more support off him in this job than I got in my previous job, Mr. Speaker. It is fair to say. I think the point that he rightly makes about the trains and the increase in the frequency from St Pancras is very important indeed. And I'm glad to say that, although not direct as far as his constituents are concerned, I'm very pleased that I was able to be at the reopening of a new station as far as Northampton is concerned, and to also see lots of road investment in Northamptonshire too.
Kate Green.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents will be alarmed at the pause in the electrification of the route between Manchester and Leeds, not just those who use that route, but also could the Secretary of State tell me whether there will be any consequences for the release of rolling stock to enable improved train services on other lines which depend on the release of stock as a consequence of electrification?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think I went in some ways to say what we've done as far as the northern area is concerned, and the Northern Powerhouse. And as I say, for the first time we're seeing electric trains taking place from Manchester to Preston, Preston to Blackpool, and we're also seeing the huge investment as far as the Victoria line is concerned. I do not believe, because what I've talked about is the release of rolling stock as far as the Great Western is concerned, and that is one of the reasons why I've chosen Great Western as an area to have a priority.
Mr. Robin Walker.
Speaker, can I thank the Secretary of State for continuing the investment in the Great Western Main Line, but he will be acutely aware, having visited recently, of the fact that my constituents take longer to get to and from the capital than they did in 1910. And can he reassure me that there's nothing in this statement that will delay the pressure on First Great Western to deliver a 2-hour service between Worcester and the capital, or the delivery of the Worcestershire Parkway station?
I can confirm that there is nothing in this statement, as my own friend has asked, that will impact on the improvements that he wishes to see.
Gary McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the assurances that the Great Western Line will remain a priority, but we have, as we've already heard that the cost of the scheme has more than trebled to £1.7 billion, and there's rumours it's been delayed by more than a year already. What reassurance can he give the people travelling from Bristol to London on that line that there won't be further pain and misery in the months and years to come?
Well, when the Honourable Lady says further pain and misery, there may be occasions when, because of the work going on, the trains will be altered and timetables may have to be changed. You cannot do the kind of huge electrification programme, as I outlined earlier in my statement, over the length we're talking about and through some of the tunnels we're talking about, without there being some big engineering challenges. But I think it is absolutely right that the Great Western Line is taken first as priority, and the new trains that will be running on that line from 2017-18 are there and used.
Mr. Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I first of all welcome the Secretary of State's statement around Network Rail, and as someone who's worked with Sir Peter Hendy in London Government, I know that he is a world-class transport executive and would make a better job of delivering major projects like London Bridge than my constituents have had to put up with so far. But can I also ask him to urge him to continue to keep up the pressure started by his rail minister upon the existing franchise holders, such as South East Trains. I can top my honourable friend from Worcester. Napoleon III chose to live in exile in Chislehurst because it had a fast and reliable train service to London. My constituents now are selling their houses and moving out because it's so bad on a daily basis, as I know.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his comments about Sir Peter Hendy? Can I also say to my honourable friend, the Rail Minister needs no encouragement from him or anybody else to keep the pressure on as far as those services are concerned.
Diana Johnson.
Speaker, with the pausing of the Transpennine electrification, can the Secretary of State say what that means for the privately funded initiative that's been put forward to electrify the line from Selby to Hull, which of course was missed out in his department's original plans?
Well, I think the Honourable Lady isn't being quite fair, because I did make some extra money available for that particular route to take it up to the next grip stage. So I think to say that we missed it out is slightly unfair. But leaving that to one side, I certainly hope that the plans that are being developed and brought forward will be able to be acted upon.
Mr. Richard Fuller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The pause in the electrification of Midland Main Line has the potential to have an impact on the selection of route for the completion of East West Rail, which is crucial for my constituents in Bedford and Kempston. So may I ask my right honourable friend to show his characteristically robust and decisive approach to write to the head of Network Rail and to say, will he stop his dawdling? Will he decide which of the two routes from Bedford is the right route for the completion of East West Rail? And will he ask my honourable friend, the Rail Minister, to visit Bedford and talk with me and the Mayor of Bedford about this very important issue?
Well, I'm sure my honourable friend, the Rail Minister, will be more than happy to meet my honourable friend in his constituency and discuss the problems which are being faced. And I will certainly feed in what my honourable friend has said to Peter Hendy as he completes the review that I've asked him to undertake.
Mr. Nigel Mills.
Constituents in Amber Valley will also be disappointed at the pause in the electrification of the Midland Main Line. But I think they actually do want to know, is this a pause or a cancellation? So can the Secretary of State just say when he might expect that to actually happen? Is it by 2025 now, or might it be a bit earlier than that?
I think if my honourable friend will allow me to allow Sir Peter to do his report before I start saying what's going to be in it, I usually find that that is the best course of action on these particular occasions, and not to anticipate what's going to be in the report that I've just commissioned until I've received the report. But as I've said to other colleagues, as far as the lines that he and I both use regularly, that getting the position so that we can have 6 trains an hour from St Pancras will be an improvement.
Ben Howlett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for giving his statement earlier on Network Rail, and I'm pleased that the largest investment in Great Western Main Line since the Victorians through Bath is a top priority. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that Sir Peter Hendy comes from Bath. Will he agree with me that it's an absolute shame that the opposition are making political capital out of this statement, given the fact their appalling record when they were in government?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend will soon find out, as he's here a bit longer, that the Labour Party just taking political opportunity and capitalism out of something which they failed in all their time in government to do anything about whatsoever, I'm afraid is nothing new. I did, with my honourable friend, walk through some of the park in Bath that we're aware that some of the electrification on the railway will take place. And one of the problems that we are facing is going through huge heritage areas and great conservation areas like his constituents is more problematic, but we are determined to meet the challenge.
Tom Perscliffe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Along with my constituents in Corby and East Northamptonshire, I'm very frustrated about the content of today's announcement in relation to the Midland Main Line electrification. And I know what my constituents will ask me when I return to the constituency tonight. They'll say, how can you justify spending billions of pounds on HS2, yet delay the progress of this electrification. What reassurance can the Minister give to my constituents?
Well, the reassurance I give to my honourable friends' constituents is HS2 is about improving and increasing the capacity on our railways because of the growth we're seeing. And actually, if we didn't improve that capacity, then we'd have even greater problems down the line as far as providing the kind of extra services which he wants to see for his constituents, not only just on passenger services, but also the huge growth as far as freight is concerned on our railways, where we have seen basically a growth of over 100% of freight on the railways. So I would say that to his constituents, and I would say that it is a government which is committed to the infrastructure investment, which I know he's very keen to see in the rest of his county, not least on some of the roads around his constituency.
Craig Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank my right honourable friend for the statement today. As a Cardiff member, I particularly welcome the commitment to the Great Western Line as your top priority. Biggest railway investment currently undergoing in Wales for some time. And I suppose, have those problems in terms of underinvestment been compounding Network Rail in terms of skill shortage? I'm thinking particularly of the huge underinvestment by the party opposite over 13 years.
Well, I'm grateful to my humble friend, and indeed a huge amount of investment will be going into Wales, not just as far as the track is concerned, but also the new trains which are on order and will be being built, that are being built at this moment.
Tom Tugendhat.
Would my right honourable friend please say a few words about what he's going to do in the southern area? Because although quite a lot of this addresses the Midlands and the North, a lot of the constituents in my area, who I have the honour to represent, rely on South East Rail and Southern Rail, which is not mentioned at all in the statement, and Network Rail's efforts would be greatly appreciated in improving the service around there as well.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think my humble friend's area does get the advantage of the 115 new train sets, basically 1,140 carriages for the Thameslink programme, which I think will have a massive impact upon his constituents. But I accept that there is growing pressure for more services right across the country. However, huge amounts of investment are already taking place, and what I'm doing today is making sure that both the fare-paying passengers and the taxpayer are getting the best value for the money that they're investing in our railways.
I'm most grateful to the Secretary of State and to colleagues. Just